ACOS comes to this question about the sustainability of the sector, obviously both in our role as being the peak body of community services in Australia, but also, I guess at the heart, our role, and this is the brief from our members, is to be a strong voice for those who experience poverty and inequality in Australia. And social services, community services is a very, very important part of that. And so we certainly look at it through that lens. The finding by the environmental scan about the increasing complexity of people who are looking for support and the impact that's having on the kind of skills that people need or need to be recognised and appropriately supported to deliver is very consistent with, for example, the ACOS Community Sector Survey, which will be coming out in a couple of weeks. So we will probably, I won't predict the outcome of that, but based on last year's findings, it certainly was a big theme in that survey as well. Fairly recently, earlier this year, ACOS, we produce, it's called the Emergency Relief Handbook, which is a very important resource for all those great workers around the country who provide emergency relief to people who are really doing it tough. And as part of updating that handbook, we conducted a whole series of consultations around the community sector. And one of the big themes that came through there was that both, yes, there's this definitely the kind of person who is coming to seek assistance, there's a sense of growing complexity about how to provide support to them, but also there is a real move amongst certainly some services and supported by government funders to be involved in what would be described as more intensive case management. So to go sort of more, move away from a band-aid approach to assistance to providing a more integrated sort of support service for people to find meet people where they're at and to work out what can be done to support them to avoid continuously falling into financial crisis such that you need emergency relief. Now that's really been, the message back is this is a very positive development, but the problem has been that principally there's no additional funding to support this kind of more intensive case management support work. So the flip side of it is that for some services they're helping even fewer people, even though the demand is higher. So it's been a real trade-off about the effectiveness of early intervention or whatever jargon you want to put on that, about really helping somebody to change their life, and the number of people that you can help. So I wanted to touch on a couple of important developments I think that is on the national agenda, which hopefully will address some of this. And so there is a very important test case that's before Fair Work Australia right now, as many of you will know, which is about endeavouring to secure an equal remuneration order for social community sector. So the case it has been brought by the Australian Services Union, and ACOS has been a very strong supporter of that case. I know the Council has been involved in providing evidence to the case and has also been a strong supporter, and so more power to us all here. I think there was a level of disappointment at the first round when there was a Commonwealth submission filed towards the end of the last year, which questioned whether or not we would be able to afford the outcome of this decision. I think it's important to put this case in context of what it's trying to achieve. It is designed to properly value the award rates that are set for all those that work within community services. It's in the context of knowing nationally we have a gender pay gap of 17% and widening, not closing. And that this is a sector in which over 80% of the workforce continues to be female and has traditionally been seen as caring work, and therefore it is well understood that in highly feminised work, in which we have some fantastic men as well, it is traditionally been undervalued. To the credit of the current federal government, through the changes to the industrial relations legislation, they did amend in the Fair Work Act. The provision is an important change to industrial law, but we would see it as a basic human right that we have proper valuation of this work, and on the basis of it having been undervalued because of the gendered nature of that work. We know we're very pleased to see that the Commonwealth, in its more recent submission, has reaffirmed its commitment to the principles of the case and has now established a community sector wages group, which will shortly be meeting to start to work through what is acknowledged by everybody and has been from the beginning, that we hope we will get a good decision on the valuation of the work, but then working out the implications in terms of funding for a sector which is about, I think, relies on about 70% of various forms of government funding. What kind of financial implications that will have. So we will certainly be working with many others in trying to inform the government process on that front. The other point to make is some of you may well have been involved in the important work that was done by the Productivity Commission looking into the not-for-profit sector. I think that all those recommendations were very warmly received by the sector. I think it's been broadly had a lot of support for the framework that it set out for reform, and ACOS, amongst others, were delighted when the current government, in its election campaign, committed to implement a number of those important recommendations. So notably, the Australian government has committed to doing what it can to legislate to establish a regulator for the not-for-profit sector. We do think that this is a really important reform, and we really hope that we can see a result with that, acknowledging the complexity of the current Australian Parliament, and this will require legislation, but we're definitely keen to do what we can to get a piece of legislation through on that front.